powerful word, a powerful prayer for you guys. That's where he's gifted at, is in prayer. And then he'll be here Sunday morning as well. And then most of all after that, he's going to let the Lord lead him, because he's going to leave here, and I believe he's going to stop in Hobbs first, and then wherever the Lord leads him, he's just going to go. That's a man of faith that's willing just to let the Lord guide him wherever he's going to go. So I'm excited, Brother Tomas, to finally see you, have you here. You know, Brother Tomas is one of those guys that's taller than he looks on Facebook or whatever, social media, because we joke, we always say, well, that person looked taller, and they end up being short. And Brother Tomas is actually the opposite, right? So we welcome you, brother, and we welcome you, and we can't wait to see what the Lord has for us in store these next 4 days. And just let the Lord lead. And I know you're a man of God, and the Lord uses you in a powerful way, and he'll continue to. We're just excited, and we're glad to have you here. And we welcome you all the way here from Texas. We welcome you here in New Mexico. Amen. Thank you.
Amen. Wow, that has probably been the best introduction I've ever had.
Welcome.
I paid him really well. What they don't know is that I get so encouraged when I watch April's devotional in the mornings. In fact, that's how I found out about Freedom Worship Church or Center.
Right.
Was from her devotions back in 2019. I started following you, sent you a friend request, and then months later, I finally get accepted as a friend. And I had, for some reason, I couldn't find her, because your posts were coming on a different page at the time when I was watching them. And I didn't watch them for a while. And then last year, during the pandemic, I found her again, the April's devotional page, and been watching you ever since. And powerful woman of God. Amen. And then because of her, I got to be introduced to Pastor Ness and watch my favorite show is Table Talk. I love Table Talk. You guys talk about some pretty awesome stuff, and the way they go around it and get the information is really, really cool. I actually kind of put stuff in the comments every once in a while to kind of throw my 2 cents in. But tonight's going to be a little different, okay? Most times I go to speak at a church or something, I got a whole sermon that I'm going to teach and preach and the whole bit. But sometimes God will give me a sermon, and he gives me, what he does is he'll give me 2 or 3 scriptures, give me a couple notes, and then it's all up to him. I'm just a vessel. The voice you're hearing is my voice, but it's his words. Okay, that's what you're going to hear tonight. But 2, 3, 4 weeks ago, sometime in August, early August I think it was, he gave me tonight's sermon. I don't have tomorrow's or Sunday's yet, but they're coming. I feel them coming already. I had 2 verses I was going to read tonight, but I'm only going to read the one, because the other one I'm going to read tomorrow night. And today's sermon is called But God. How many have heard that term?
Yeah.
Amen.
Amen. But God. And I got this feeling that this whole weekend that's going to be kind of the theme of the weekend. Okay? But tonight is going to be about my testimony. Who I am. Who I used to be. And some of the horrible things that I did. That still sometimes haunt me, makes me ask God, why me? Why did you want me? First scripture, if you want to look in your Bibles, in Genesis chapter 50, and we're going to read verse 20. This is a fairly well-known scripture, simply because if you follow me, especially people on Facebook Live, on my page right now, that follow me, I preach a lot about Joseph. He's one of my favorite characters in the Bible. I relate to him a lot. And I'm just amazed at how he went from being thrown in a pit, pulled out, sold into slavery, then gets accused of something he didn't do and gets thrown in prison for a few years, only to become the second most powerful man in the world at the time. Man, only God, right? But God. And in this situation right here, he's reassuring his brothers. Their father has just passed away, and now that he's gone, the brothers again are back in their fear of being persecuted and killed by Joseph, and there's nothing they can do to stop it if that's the case. So they make up a story about the last thing their father said, which he didn't really say, to convince Joseph to kill him for what they had done to him. In verse 20, this is where they got through telling him that, and in verse 19 he tells them, "Do not be afraid, for am I in the place of God?" In other words, am I God? Am I in his place? But instead, he tells them in verse 20, "But as for you, you meant evil against me." And here it comes. But God meant it for good, in order to bring it about as it is this day, to save many people alive. In other words, you guys did what you did to do evil to me, but God allowed it because he had a bigger plan to use me to save all of you and all of the nation of Egypt and beyond. Whew. Of course, they stopped shaking in their boots about that time. They're like, "Oh, wow, okay, cool. It's not going to kill us." But that phrase, "but God," came at me back in April of this year. And it's stuck with me, and it's become kind of a theme saying for me. And then when I started thinking about my testimony of who I used to be, my spiritual walk with God and other things, I realized, but God. Because I shouldn't be alive today. I should have died several different times over the years of my entire life. But God prevented it from happening. Just recently, in June, I contracted, I had COVID. Didn't know I had it. And for Wednesday night, Thursday, Friday, I went into insulin shock 3 times on those days. By Friday, I was so bad, I was so deep into insulin shock that the lady who cuts my hair kept trying to call me, and I wasn't answering the phone because I was missing my appointment for the 2nd day in a row. And so she called a friend of hers, who was a friend of mine, who was a nurse, to come check on me. And she, instead of coming to check on me, she called me, apparently. I don't remember. But this is the story that they both told me. And that she called me and I sounded fine, so she didn't bother to come see me. Because I sounded okay. But the beautician that cut my hair persisted and kept pushing her to come check on me. She says, "I know he needs medical attention. You need to get over there." So she did. And when she showed up, I had to change from my pajama pants into regular pants real fast. And she just ran into my house and made me sit down and check my sugar levels. And it was 41 points, which is, yeah, I'm in shock. I'm getting ready to go into a coma. And she immediately gave me some grape juice that I have, which is really good to get my sugar up. But she gave it a few minutes, checked it again, and it was only 51. That's still not good. It's better than the 41, but not good enough. And she says, listen, come on, I'm going to take you to go eat. We're going to go down to Mamacita's, which is a Mexican restaurant in the town I lived in. And she says, I'm going to feed you. Mexican food, if you're a diabetic and you're going into insulin shock, that's some of the best stuff to get you out of shock in a hurry. If you're not going into insulin shock, you have to take a whole lot extra insulin so that you can eat all the Mexican food. At least if you eat it like I do, okay? So anyway, we didn't make it to the van because I was stumbling, was slurring my words, and she's a little short little thing, and she walks up and wraps her arms around me and pulled me in really tight, and with her other phone is calling 911. She says, you're going to the hospital. I can't be responsible for you. You aren't going to make it to Mamacita's. You need to go to the hospital now. And I didn't want to go because I don't have the insurance. They want lots of money. And short story, they talked me into going, and they couldn't figure out why they couldn't get my sugar levels up, because they gave me a bag full of that saline fluid, which is basic sugar water, and the highest they could get my sugar level up was 178. That's high, but not high enough for as much as I took. I should have been in the 400s or 500s for as much fluid as I took in. And they fed me on top of that. They checked my kidneys, they were checking everything else. I had a real bad headache, and they had to give me a medicine through the IV to get it to go away because Tylenol wasn't working. They checked me for COVID. They did that rapid test. That's the worst thing I think they came up with. That rapid test said I was negative. I'm like, yes, I told you guys I'm not going to get COVID. And so they let me go home, told me I needed to check with my doctor, and because they couldn't figure out why my insulin was dropping and wouldn't come up. So 6 o'clock the next morning, my phone rings. I don't recognize the phone number. It's real early Saturday morning. Nobody calls me on that time of day. So I ignored the call. It called again. I ignored it again. The third time it called, I went, okay, fine. Let me find out who this is. It must not be a sales call. They don't get that desperate. And it was the hospital telling me that they had sent the test out for a more thorough testing, more sensitive test. And if you're going to get tested, make sure they do the sensitive test, because those are more accurate. And they came back that I was positive. Thing is, and COVID is the reason my sugar levels kept dropping, because I was eating all this time. And so I don't know. It was COVID, and COVID almost killed me. I should have died Friday if the friend hadn't come and got me. I would have gone into a coma, and I wouldn't be standing here today. The devil has been trying to kill me for all of 2020 and 2021. And he's been using the diabetes to do that. I've gone into insulin shock several times in the last couple of years, since last August, a little over a year. So, but God says, no, I'm not going to let him die. And I grew up as a Jehovah's Witness and went through their ministry theology school and became eventually what they call a full-time pioneer. Basically, I was a full-time minister. They called us pioneers. Some people would call it a missionary of sorts. Kind of do what I do right now. I go out, knock on doors. Now I don't knock on doors so much. Now I just catch people at the gas station, Walmart parking lots, since the pandemic inside of Walmart. And it's the employees that are coming up to me asking me for prayer because they know who I am. And in the Walmart in Red Oak, I tell everybody, that's my Walmart. You don't believe me? You come with me and find out why I call it my Walmart. And when we walk out, they're looking at me like, I didn't know you were that popular. No, I'm not. God is, though. And I like to walk around praying with people. But over the years, I grew up that way, got married, had 3 kids. We got a divorce. And I was kicked out of the religion because I had an affair so that my wife could stay in the religion. And but I still needed God in my life. So I became Catholic because all my friends were Catholic. I was back in the day, they used to call me the white Chicano. Because and all the girls, my buddies would tell all the Mexican girls that I was half and half. My dad was white because my last name's Haggard. That's not a Mexican name. It's a Scott English name. But my mom was Mexican, but I never learned Spanish because my dad wouldn't let her speak to me in Spanish. Boy, we knew how to lie. And those girls believed those stories. So, over the years, got married again as a Catholic, and that marriage didn't work out. Had another baby, beautiful baby girl. Get to talk to her all the time still. But then after that, I met a lady and we moved in together. Long story short, it turned out she was a backslidden Christian. And she had taken me with her sister and family, friends to a dinner for a men's home. And they got this one pastor to get up on stage to ask for the offering. He doesn't like doing offerings because he's terrible at it. And I found out why he's terrible that night. And I wasn't going to give a dime to this place because of him. And I was never, ever going to go to his church because he's just one of those money-hungry preachers that just wants to take your money. That was a Wednesday. No, that was like a Saturday night or something, weekend night. The following Wednesday, my girlfriend and her sister are bugging me. They want to go to church, and they want me to go with them. And I'm like, okay. Well, I'll tell you what, I'll go as long as it's not Fernie's church. I am not going in that man's church. And they're like, oh, no, Bob, we're going to go to this other church. So we went, but the other church was closed that night. Their service was on Tuesday night, not Wednesday. So we went to another church, and they were closed. And so finally the girls are going, let's just go to Fernie's church. It's open. We know he's got service tonight. And I'm thinking in my head, I am not going to go in there. We're going to pull up. I'm going to drop the girls off, park the car, throw her the keys, and I'm going to walk 5 miles home in Bakersfield, California. In some of the worst neighborhood to walk in. I was going to do it. I'm not going in that church. And we pull up, and all the ladies are walking across the street from the parking lot to the church, and they're in their dresses and looking good and everything. And my girlfriend and her sister were in jeans and a nice blouse. They weren't in fancy dresses, and they're going, oh no, we can't go in there. We're not dressed good enough. We can't go in. So what do? The most dumbest thing I could have done if I didn't want to go in that church. I told them, because all of a sudden, this lady and her adult daughter come running across the street right in front of us, and they're wearing jeans and a nice blouse and a nice jacket. And I went, you could go in, look at them. They're dressed just like you are, and they're going in there, so you can go in there. You got no excuse not to go in. And I realized at that moment, I just sank myself. I was not going to get out of going. I had to go in. that night I became a born-again Christian. And it wasn't because Fernie was there. He wasn't in there, in fact. He wasn't preaching. It was one of the elders. And he was talking to backslidden people. And what I couldn't figure out was, how did he know my life? Everything he said applied to me. How does he know me? I've never seen this man before in my life. And he's saying everything about me. And wait a minute, he's supposed to be talking about backslidden Christians. Was I a backslidden Christian and I just didn't know it? So they made an altar call for all the people who wanted to get saved for the first time. Come up. A whole bunch of people went up, and I'm sitting there. I feel this pull to go, but I fought it and I won for the moment. Then they made a call for all the backslidden people to come up and get prayer. And my girlfriend and her sister immediately started to go, and my girlfriend says, come with me, come with me. I went, no, this is your turn. My turn was earlier and I missed it. So you should go. And then this usher who I had just met that night, all of a sudden, he's standing right next to me. And I do not know how he got there without me seeing him coming. Because the way the seats were set up, the stage is over here, and the seats are long way, and so he would have to come down the aisle, come up into my aisle, the seats, and I would see him walking up, but I didn't see him. He just showed up and was standing there, and he's pulling on he takes my arm and he just gently pulls. But it felt like he was dragging me because I was trying to fight back and not go, and I was losing the battle real fast. And he kept saying, it's your time. I said, no, my time was earlier and I missed it, man. I have to wait. No, this is your time right now. And he's grinning really big. Got this glow all over his face. Walks down to the altar, to the stage, and looks up at the elder because he all of a sudden sees me coming. And he runs over to find out what's going on. And he tells him that I was up there to receive Jesus for the first time. And he had a look on his face that said, finally, welcome home. He didn't say it, but it was all in his face. He had that look. And if I start crying right now, it's because of the hot sauce they fed me earlier. I get emotional when I tell this story. My girlfriend saw me being walked up to the altar as they were walking her off into a back room to get information from her and stuff, which I ended up being in with her later. But that was in September of 1989. Fast forward into the early 90s, the Lord showed me that relationship fell apart, and a lot of jealousy involved, and it wasn't from me, it was from her. And I couldn't deal with the jealousy and stuff, and we ended up breaking up, and it was ugly. And I ended up back with my second wife, and we got back together, and then because her parents didn't like me, and it wasn't because I was white, it was because my first 3 kids were half black, and they were Mexican, and her mother hated black people. So they were trying to keep me and her apart so we couldn't have kids together. They missed that boat. We had a child together. But we were living in a small town in California, and out of my depression and stuff, because my wife's living down the street from me and I can't see her or my kid because of her parents, and I'm having to take them back to court again and fight again to get to have visitation with my own daughter. I walked down to this little Pentecostal church, and I'm talking about old Pentecostals, where women don't wear makeup, you don't wear jeans or shorts, you wore dresses down to your ankles, and you were covered up to your neck type Pentecostals. And I walked into the church. The pastor's uncle, who was the church evangelist, turned around and saw me, and he goes, "Oh, Lord, he's charismatic. He's going to turn this church upside down." And I did. I ended up becoming part of the church. The Lord had showed me at one point that I was going to be in the full-time ministry, so I thought I was supposed to do it then. Just like Joseph. Remember what he got those dreams when he was, 17? And he went and bragged about the dreams to his brothers and then to his dad? That didn't go over too good for him, did it? Well, same thing happened to me. I started a care ministry, a love ministry, where we went and prayed with people at their homes. And I went after people who had backslidden, left church. Not just my church, any church. And the rule was we weren't allowed to talk them into coming to our church unless they had been our members first. We always encouraged them to go back to the church they had been at before, and they had to try to work things out and get forgiveness. And if they still want to come to our church, they're more than welcome. But we weren't going to go around stealing other church members from other churches. We just wanted to help the Christians that were hurting. And one day the pastor came to me and he said, "You know, you need to stop doing what you're doing." And I'm like, "Why? What did I do wrong?" He says, "You didn't do a thing wrong. Because if you don't stop, we're going to have to knock the walls out and add on to the building because we're running out of room." Because the people would still, even though we'd encourage them to go back to their other churches, to the church they'd left, they would still come to ours because our church is the one that reached out to them when they were hurting and in need. I was getting the church to pay electric bills, water bills, things like that, providing food for the homes. Yeah, I love doing that stuff. And so I told him, I said, "Well then, I'm not going to quit. Knock the walls out. Get a contractor." And he grinned. But my marriage again fell apart. And it was ugly. And I lost my wife and my daughter. I went to Reno, Nevada, where my brother was at. And I walked away from God. I walked away from the ministry. I walked away from everything. And the reason I did that was because I believed in my heart I had failed God. And there was no but God at that point for me. I was done. I realized I was going to end up in hell because I failed. But God never left me alone. Even when I became a Mormon, thinking that might help me, that didn't work. They made me a priest. Still didn't work. So I ended up in Washington State and ended up living in a little studio apartment above a New Age New Age bookstore, as they're called. The ones with tarot cards and all kinds of other neat stuff, herbs, certain candles, the whole bit, all the magical stuff that you need to do different things with. And they had a psychic in there who read the cards. And every day of the week I was come down out of my apartment and have to walk right past that store to go to work and stuff. And one day, out of curiosity, I finally broke down and I went in there just to see how real this guy was. And don't be fooled, people. The devil can use those same talents to tell you all about you. And he did. And he didn't know me. I never met him. We never talked. Never walked in that store, never saw him on the streets, except for when he was putting a sign out that he was available. But he knew everything about me. And that was the beginning of the worst time of my life, because I started becoming one of them. and they had a little spiritual cult going on, and they used one of their single girls to lure me in to the group. And I've always had a fascination with Native American traditions, shamanism, things like that. And they had tarot cards that were made out of, or they were animal cards for animal spirits and stuff, and you could do readings with those. And I always liked those, and I thought I would end up with those for Christmas that year. Instead, they gave me a set of runes, which were symbols that were drawn or burnt into little wood chips. I found out later they got them on wood, they got them on rocks, they got cards. They try to do tarot readings with runes. And for a true rune person, those were insulting. I became what they called a rune master. I was a full-on magician or wizard, and I could do magic with those things. I'm the guy that was living 5 miles out of town in the woods with no vehicle, and I would get hitchhiked out to the highway. I had a police officer one time pick me up and drop me off at the highway and kept telling me, hitchhiking out here is against the law. Don't you be hitchhiking. Oh man, I got a ride picking me up. And yeah, I did. Put my thumb out and someone always stopped. Real quick. I never sat out there more than 5 minutes. Of course, I had to wait till he drove off and was out of sight before I did that. And then I'd go into town, do readings in front of a store, and do business around town. And then it was time to go home. I'd start hitchhiking home. And there was a railroad. You had to cross the railroad tracks to get to where I lived, in the woods. And this one time, this lady picked me up, and a train was coming, and she's like, oh man. I said, don't worry, it's gonna go by right now. And as soon as we pulled up to the drive to go across, the caboose went across. And she looked at me like I was somebody super spiritual or something, which kind of was, sort of. But I did that for several years. I moved to Idaho and that's where I became the master of the runes. Because in my studies, I learned that true rune masters, true magicians, wizards, wouldn't have the symbols on rocks, chips of wood, cards, or any of that stuff. You would take 9 sticks and cut them the same length, little branches. And then you would cut your hand, which I didn't do, but a couple times I did, and then read them, that's what they called it. In other words, spread your blood over the sticks. And then you would stand in front of a cloth, a white one, that was about 6 feet square. And then you would chant whatever it is you wanted, and then cast them out. That's where the casting of the bones and stuff came from, was they cast the sticks out onto the cloth. And the sticks would fall into the shapes of runes. I was so good at seeing runes that I could walk down the street and I would see runes in the trees, the frameworks of buildings. There was a time I could probably find runes in this building right here. And most people would always see the two-dimensional. Whatever shapes they formed, that's what they saw. But I got to where I could take and go into, not really a trance, but an altered state, sort of. And the runes would drop, the sticks would drop down into a 3-dimensional forms, and I saw 3 times as many runes as anybody else could see. The readings I would do would be 95% accurate most every time, and that was good. I did spells to try to help somebody cross over. In other words, kill them. Found out later that I was being asked to do it because there was a battle over an inheritance. And if the woman died first, this one lady's uncle would be alive, and if he died last, she got all the money. If he died first, then her kids from previous relationship would get all the money. And my hair went gray. I had really pretty brown, dark hair, and after trying to do those spells and help her cross over, because she was really sick, and it was probably time for her to pass, but she waited long enough until the husband died, and then she passed immediately. As soon after he did, the day or two later, she passed. And my hair went gray from doing that stuff. People talk about today about the drugs they did. Oh yeah, I did those things. Talk about the alcohol they drank. Well, I did that. And all the women they had, or the men, if you're a woman. And I did that too. They talk about people they killed. Talk about crimes they committed. But to me, all of that was in the natural. That's flesh and blood stuff. My crimes are spiritual crimes. I did things against God Himself. And I really believed that I didn't have any hope. But God. I was working at a catalog store, or not store, but factory, and I worked the graveyard shift. And one Saturday morning I was getting off work and I needed a ride home, and this real pretty young lady who I kind of liked anyway offered to give me a ride home. Only thing was, the only way I was going to get to go home was I had to go to church with her because they were having this guest evangelistic family there doing a revival, and that was the only way I was going to get home. I'm like, okay, fine, I'll go to church with you. I didn't want to walk 20 miles to get home, and I figured I could deal with it. And so we went to church. They played some beautiful music. They gave a sermon. I can't remember the sermon. But I do know that the gods that I served at the time were having a fit that I was in a Christian church. They were having a fit because they were afraid Jesus was going to take me away from them again. They didn't want to lose me. I was doing some pretty awesome stuff in their realm, and they wanted to keep me there. And I made them, I told them, just, hey, calm down, man. You know good and well He's not going to want me back. And I'm just here to get a ride home. So they left me alone. But then they made an altar call, and the young lady that gave me the ride ran up, got prayed for, and then fell at the altar. And all of a sudden, I'm feeling this pull to go up. I'm like, oh man, she's praying for me. This is not what, Jesus, you just tell her to stop, because you and I both know that I'm not worthy anymore, that I failed, that you don't want me. Tell her to just quit. Tell Jesus to tell somebody to quit praying for you? Yeah, that didn't go so well for me, because the pull all of a sudden got stronger. It was like somebody didn't just throw a rope around me. The rope was the first time. Now chains were wrapped around me, yanking on me and dragging me up the altar. And I'm thinking, all right, fine, I'll go up there. Now you got to realize, guys, my hair was down to here. And I had a metal feather earring in my ear, a medicine bag around my neck. I had a tie-dye baseball jersey shirt on, jeans, and sandals with a toe ring. Okay? I have tattoos on me that are very, very demonic. And I'm thinking, if I was the pastor or the preacher, the evangelist, I'd be asking me if I was up there to receive Jesus for the first time. I would have asked. And I didn't have my hair in a tail. I had it down so it was flowing. They didn't ask me. They didn't ask me. The wife started praying over me, and I don't remember her prayer. But then her husband walked up behind her, and he started speaking a word over me. I remember what he said, because it was a but God situation. He said, your Father God loves you so much, and He's so proud of you, and He's wanting you to just turn around and take His hand. And He's going to take everything you've been through, and He's going to use it for His glory. And He's going to send you the people that others would be afraid to even get near. And I'm like, wow. Okay, He's not talking about Odin. And at that point, because of where my brain was, because of where I was at in life and things I was doing, I thought He was saying that God was okay with me being a room master. So I was excited about that. And so I stayed that way for a few more years, still doing the stuff that not good to be doing on a spiritual level. Until 2007, I was with the woman who would be my last wife. And we had talked about, I was feeling that I needed to get back to Jesus. We rode Harley Davidsons. I was a biker. I was a writer for a local biker rag, as we call them, magazine. And I was the very popular Harley Davidson salesman. If you're a salesman of Harley Davidsons, all bikers think you're the best guy to have as their best friend. Because they want, all about the bikes. They want great deals. I never paid for a drink whenever I would go out to the bars, very seldom. But her and I talked about maybe going back to church. She wasn't into the stuff I had been into, witchcraft, things like that. And so we went to a church, and I rededicated myself to Jesus in 2007. But I wouldn't rededicate to a ministry. I still didn't feel worthy. Didn't think I was good enough because of all the things I had done. And I should have known better, because when I did do the ministry, when I was serving God, man, I was on fire. And I was preaching to people then about forgiveness. And yet, I was believing the lie that I wasn't forgiven. So, I realized I might have a better chance of going to heaven now, but I knew I wouldn't be able to do the ministry. And when my wife and I broke up, I ended up in Dallas, Texas, met a young lady and her daughter that became like a daughter and granddaughter to me, and became family. So that when I came home off the road, I had somebody to hang out with for a few days while I was home. Well, she was a Christian girl and took me to church. And long story short, I ended up in a big church in Dallas area. And they have the theater seats that if you don't feel like dealing with anybody, you can run up and hide up in them things, right? And it was 3 weeks before Easter. And I was in one of those moods. I wasn't doing well emotionally. I was still real new in being a Christian again. And I showed up late on purpose because I didn't want to deal with anybody. I didn't want to talk to anybody. And they were doing praise and worship. And I come around the corner, and I'm getting ready to go up the stairs to go up into the top of the theater seats. And the usher, what I never saw again after that day, grabbed me by my arm gently. He didn't yank on me. And he says, "No, man, brother, we got a seat for you up front." You know, God likes to set me up. And I knew that. And the first thing I did was look towards the ceiling. I said, "What are you up to?" Because what had happened is, the reason I rededicated my life was because I started thinking about that day when I was long-haired, hippie, and they're telling me that God loved me and He was going to use everything I've been through. It wasn't because it was proud that I was a room master. It was proud of me because of who I was, period. And that's why I rededicated my life. But I still, like I said, I still didn't feel worthy of the ministry. Well, now they're telling me they got a seat for me up front. And I found out later they don't do that because I became an usher later. And they told us not to do that. People are going to go up there, let them go up there, you know. We were just there to help them find seats up front if that's where they wanted to sit. Okay. So, I feel like he was an angel because I never saw him again. Because it was like a week later, 3 weeks later, I became an usher. And I never saw him. But he walks me up 3 rows from the front, just to the side of the pastor. Like this section right over there. And I'm in the 3rd row back there. And the pastor gets up after praise and worship, announcements, offerings and stuff. He gets up, puts his paperwork on the podium and looks down at it, looks up like he's getting ready to say something, and then looks back down again. Does that 3 times. And finally he goes, "Okay, I'm just going to obey the Spirit. Somebody in this section right over here, you're called to the full-time ministry and you've been running. I tried to grab the seat and jump up and run, and something grabbed me and held me down. I'll give you 3 guesses on who that was." Yeah, Holy Spirit, He's real good grabbing me and holding me down. He held me there for the entire service. He would not let me get up. And he goes, "I'm thinking maybe missionary, but I like the missionaries," or he actually loves missionaries. So that was more him, sort of. And then he goes, "But whatever it is, it's time for you to obey." And then he was able to give his sermon. He may not have known he was pointing at me, and it looked like he was looking right at me. And nobody else in that section even flinched or had any indication that it was them that he was talking to. I knew it was me. And I ran out of the church as soon as things was over. I got back to the trucking yard where I was staying and working at, because they had me, I was an over-the-road driver technically, but they had me working locally because the local guy was out. And that's how come I was in church. And I got back to the yard, and my manager goes, "Hey man, I hate to do this to you, man, but I gotta send you to Wyoming." He says, "And you won't be back in time next Sunday for church." And I said, "That's okay. I need to get out of town. I'll take it." It was Easter when I got back, or just before Easter, the week before Easter, I got back. And I spent 2 weeks emailing the pastor of the Spanish congregation. He also was the pastor of the men's ministry, and he was the pastor of the singles groups. So he's like, "You can talk to me." So I did. I told him how broken I was and how messed up I was, and I needed help. And so through our emails, I was getting help. And so when I told him about what happened at the church that one Sunday, and he encouraged me to obey. If God was really calling me, he said, you need to obey it. And so that Sunday I went to church, and I went up to the altar, and I told God, I don't know why you want me. I've done so much wrong. I've not sinned. I didn't just sin against people, but I sinned against you. And you still want me to be a minister? You want me in the ministry? Preaching and teaching and whatever? I don't understand it, but if you want me that bad, then I'll do it. But this time I'm not going to jump right in. I'm going to take my sweet time and let you lead me and guide me. If washing toilets is going to be my ministry for the next 20 years, then that's what I'll do. The next day, I get an email from the church asking me to be an usher. I told them that I don't have a suit and tie, thinking that was going to get me out of it. The next email said, suit and tie not required. Dang, didn't get out of it. And I became an usher of the church. Long story short, I went from being an usher to helping do evangelism work. I wanted to be an evangelist. I did not want to be a pastor. And I did not want to be what they call me now. That definitely didn't want to be that. Too much responsibility. I was telling you that how evangelists, they come in, they stir everything up, and they run. That's what I wanted to do. I didn't want to have to stick around and clean up the mess. And instead, God had a few different people, pastors mostly, come up to me and tell me, after knowing who I was and watching me do the work that I did, I helped create one of the largest homeless ministries in Dallas, Texas at the time. I helped. I didn't do it. Okay? But I had a pastor that was in charge of that I was part of the group that helped build that. And I enjoyed it. But they started noticing the calling in my life, and they kept coming up to me and saying, you're a pastor. I said, no, I'm not. Don't be putting that on me. And they're like, but you're a pastor. You have that calling. I said, no. He said, and then the pastor, the evangelism pastor, who was teaching me to be an evangelist, called me in the office one day, and he says, tell me what's in your heart. And so I told him about the care ministry, love ministry that I used to do, and that I still feel like I need to do now. And he just grinned real big, and he goes, you do know that's a pastoral calling. And I'm like, no, don't say that. So when I finally said, listen guys, I can't be a pastor, I don't have a building. And they said, you don't need a building. The streets are your church. And it still is. 2014, Jesus told me to go into the streets, pray with people. Not so much necessarily homeless type situation, more like the gas stations, the parking lots, the Walmarts, whatever I needed to go to talk to people and pray with them. He said, don't worry about a paycheck. I'll take care of you. I told that lying devil to get behind me because I needed a paycheck. I wanted to get married again one day. And women want you to have a paycheck. And God just kind of pats me on the head, like, yeah, okay, we'll see how this works out for you. For 5 years, I resisted that calling. I did do the prayer ministry. I started in 2017 the TomasHaggard prayer ministry on Facebook to be available to people who needed prayer or just needed someone to talk to. And mainly, I focused on people who battle with depression, anxiety, mental illnesses. I suffered from depression for many years. I have family members that have one's bipolar and the other one is similar, but he's got a different disease, but it's like being bipolar. And so I know I know what they're dealing with. I know what people suffer with. And so God had me set that up so people could message me, so they didn't have to worry about getting face-to-face and whatnot. It's a little easier to message somebody about what you're dealing with than it is to get face-to-face with them. So I started doing that, and then in 2018, he told me I had to leave the church I was at and start a Facebook church. I told that lying devil to get behind me again. Facebook church? What do you mean? Leave my church? What are you talking about? And found out that was on a Sunday morning. And then by that afternoon, I found out by two other people that there was already people already doing Facebook churches. And I'm like, okay. And then this Baptist pastor friend of mine called me up about something else. And then I shared with him what I thought God was telling me, but I didn't believe it was God. He goes, no, that's God. That's perfectly for you. There's a whole bunch of people who can't get to the buildings every Sunday because of illnesses or work or whatever. And if you do that, then you'll reach all those people that we're not getting. I'm like, who are you and what'd you do with Mike? Because that just didn't sound like him. And so I did that. I quit the church. I started doing videos on Facebook. And then in 2019, I became homeless again, because I had been homeless in 2014 because I had open heart surgery. I should have died in 2014 from a full-blown widowmaker heart attack, but I never had the heart attack. I never died. And everybody, including the doctors, agreed that the only reason I'm alive today is because God kept me alive so they could do the surgery on me and save me. That's another one of those times when the devil was trying to kill me because he knew what God was trying to do with me. He had spent years trying to get me to come back. Demons would show up in my house or in different places telling me that I needed to come back home. And I kept resisting, and I got to where they didn't use, that story about the demon told those 7 boys, Paul I know, Jesus I know, I don't know you guys, and then beat all 7 of them up, stripped them of their clothes and threw them out, right? They don't do that with me. They know who I am in Jesus. And so they eventually stopped coming. But now I end up in situations where I get real close to being dead. So he's trying to kill me off. He tried to keep me from coming here. And spent all the month of August trying to keep me from coming, making my life as miserable as you can make it. I lost my home because I was living in a 25-foot travel trailer that God gave me. After spending all of 2019 homeless, going out in the parking lots, praying with people, coming into churches like this one, and preaching about what a great God we have in Jesus, having altar calls with people lined up to get prayer and a word from God. And then I would go out and get in my car and go to sleep in my car. I didn't have a home. I only had someplace to live rather than my car when I would travel out of town. God started in October of 2019 to send me out for a week at a time, one time 2 weeks, to go work with a church in one city and then another church in another city, spend all week with them, going to people's houses for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and having the immediate family be there, but all of a sudden there'd be about 4 or 5 other people that didn't live there were there. And by the time my period of time with them was over, there was probably maybe 20 people in the house and asking questions about Jesus, about their lives, about prayer. People were getting saved, delivered, restored. all kind, healed. That's what the apostles did. I thought that was a prophet, and I was going to be okay with if God was going to call me a prophet. But I learned later that's what Jesus and the apostles were doing. Go read the 4 Gospels. Whenever they would go into somebody's house, next thing you know, there's a whole bunch of people lined up outside. And it wasn't me, it was him. Okay? But then in January 2020, God gave me a 25-foot travel trailer to live in rather than living in my car. No, it wasn't a 5-bedroom house. I'm single, I have a small little dog. What do we need a 5-bedroom house for? What am I going to do with another 4 bedrooms? And I had people telling me, well, man, if you were really called to God, He'd give you a 5-bedroom house. That don't make sense to me. That, what they don't realize is if you've been living in your car for a year, that 25-foot travel trailer with a bedroom, a bathroom, all separate, a dining area, a couch area, and a full kitchen, that's a mansion, right? But in August, the city of Red Oak decided that I couldn't live in my trailer on the property I was living on anymore. And I had nowhere to take it. Didn't have any money at that point. I'm like, it was a Wednesday morning, and I asked God, what do you want me to do? What am I going to do? He said, sell your trailer. What? You gave that to me. That's my house. What am I going to do? He said, sell it. So I did. But what I didn't really think about was that just about a week prior to that, I've been dating this beautiful little Mexican girl, and I told God, I said, Lord, if she's the one, I need a house. Don't tell God you need something if you really don't want Him to take away what's going to keep you from getting that. My trailer was going to keep me from getting the house. So the trailer's gone. I don't have a house yet, but when I get done with this tour, we're believing God that He's going to provide a house. So He's done that kind of stuff with other people. He's done that with me. I've gotten 2 cars from Him just by letting Him do His thing. So I went from being a demonic worshiping room master to now they call me apostle. And I didn't want that position either. There's a whole lot more responsibility in being an apostle. Because what a lot of people don't want to understand, and every pastor, prophet, and apostle is going to get mad at me right now, but we are not to be elevated. We are not anybody special. You don't put big couches on the stage for the guest minister to sit on while you're up there preaching so that you can show them off to everybody there. We are servants. Teacher, evangelist, pastor, prophet, apostle are not a noun. They are a verb. The verb is servant. And the higher up, as we would call it, in the ministry you go, the lower the servant you become. So me, I'm the lowest of them all. I'm His servant. I'm your servant. But I'm also the servant to other congregations and other churches throughout 3 states now. I went from being a nobody, and I'm still really not anybody special, but I went from being a horrible, vile individual to now they call me apostle, and I'm a multi-state speaker. In July, I spoke in Oklahoma. Now I'm here in New Mexico, speaking here, and if everything goes the way I've been told it's going to go, I'm going to end up in Hobbs, New Mexico, speaking down there. I've spoke all over Texas. And I'm still not done with Texas. There's areas I haven't been yet. I'm going to a bunch of them in a couple of weeks. So, and that's but God. I don't care what you're going through. I don't care what you've been through. I don't care who you are or what you did. Okay? Paul said that he was the worst of all sinners. Well, I'm in that category. And it doesn't, when I think about that right now, it doesn't surprise me, because there are many people, in fact, the prophet, pastor that God used to call me to be the apostle, she went ahead a step further to make it worse on me and said, in fact, you're like the Apostle Paul. I'm like, no, don't do that to me. Paul was the greatest of all the apostles. And I don't feel greater than anybody. But I've had a few other people. In fact, I had a Baptist elder, and they don't believe in the apostle, or they don't believe in modern day apostles. And he told me, after telling him what God was doing with me, he says, oh, so you're a modern day Apostle Paul with a cell phone in a car. Like, you did not just say that. But if God can do that with me, but God can do a whole lot more with you. I don't care what you've done, what you thought you did, or how bad you feel. I don't care what you're going through right now. Because trust me, the devil will do everything he can to convince you that you're not worthy. He did that to me for several years. And now that he can't get me to come back to him, and that I cast him and his demons out of other people, and I mess up all their programs that they try to do with other people, because I got people around the world, literally, they reach out to me for prayer. And then within days, they're writing me back saying, Pastor, you're so great. That prayer came true. Thank you so much. I got a lady, I was telling Pastor April earlier, in the Philippines, that 2 years ago lost her husband. And he passed away. And she became angry at God for taking her husband. And for 2 years, she was mad at God for what he did to her. But because she started following my page, started receiving the little notices, inspirational stuff, prayers that I send out to people, she wrote me a couple of weeks ago to tell me that because of what, and I had no idea, didn't know about her husband dying 2 years ago, did not know she was mad at God. But because of all the videos that she watches, all the stuff I send her, and now she follows Pastor April on her devotional. Yeah. Give her applause. She deserves it. She wrote me to tell me that because of all of that, she's now going to church again. She's not angry with God, and she's praying to God, and she's sharing all of my stuff with all of her kids and her family and her friends, and they're all excited that she's back in church and that she's serving God big time. Of course, she's Catholic, but that's okay, because God's sending friends of hers who go to a born-again Christian church to invite her, and she told me about it, and I said, well, that just happens to be the type of church I go to. You need to go. So we're praying that she's going to do that. But that's the kind of thing that God is using me for now, instead of doing the person that I used to be. And those are the things that God can do in your life. No, I'm not going to say that he's going to make you all apostles. You don't want that. There's not a whole lot of glory in it. At least it's not supposed to be that way. But he can fix anything in your life. Okay? Now, I will say this, with things like COVID and things like that, there's so much fear in the church right now that it's running rapid. Not just in the world, but it's running rapid in the church. It came at me, it's come at people in your church, It's come at prophets that are very anointed that I know of, and did its best to kill them, literally. And they're still suffering from side effects from it. Okay? But it's the fear that is causing that to happen. We need to stop being afraid. Now, I'm not saying that take your mask off, don't get the vaccine, stuff like that. I'm not saying that, because I got vaccinated. I had the disease, and before my 90 days were up, I went and got vaccinated. In fact, I got my second one just a week ago before coming here. So, there's nothing wrong with getting vaccinated. There's nothing wrong with wearing the mask if that makes you feel comfortable. But don't let the fear of the virus enable you and put you in so much fear that you end up dying from it. Because if you do die, Paul said, if I stay here, I live in Jesus. If I go to heaven, I'm with Jesus. You know, people were scared to death because of being diabetic and the heart condition and stuff, strokes, and because of my age, I was at real high risk. I have family members that were calling me daily, you okay? You ain't got the virus, dude? And when I did get it, they about fell out. Scared to death I was going to die. And I didn't. The worst symptoms I had was going into insulin shock. After that, I just had a little sneeze, a little cough. Never got a fever. Weak. I was weak for a few weeks after that. But I didn't have it bad at all. And but I always told everybody, when everybody was screaming and crying and running, I'm like, yeah, hey, if one of you guys get it, bring it over here. And if I die from it, I'm going to go to heaven. And I'm going to be done. I won't have to deal with you or any of this other mess anymore. Nobody would come and give it to me. It's a terrible thing. Just remember who you are in Christ. Amen? Because I had to remember. God had to remind me. I went through all this other stuff. But God said no. That's not who you are. And no, you're not going to die. It's not time yet. I'm probably going to be around until He comes. And that's not going to be that much longer. So, anyway, that's who I am. And hopefully the pastor won't kick me out of the house tonight and send me down the road after finding out who I was. Because I'm not that man anymore, fortunately. And I'm going to ask the prayer team or the praise and worship team to come back up here. I love the song they're going to sing. The song they sang about east from the west, right? Yeah, that was my story. Because Jesus had to show me how far east was from the west because of what I had done, and yet He still wanted me that bad. And if you want to start the music, I'm going to invite you if you want to. Oh, she wants my microphone. Yeah, there's that one. I'm going to invite you, if you're going through something in life, if you're dealing with any kind of illness or sickness, you just don't feel right, or you're not sure about your relationship with Jesus, or you just want prayer because the prayer guy is here, I want to invite you to come up as they're singing, okay? And let me pray with you, because that's my most favorite thing to do. I like doing that better than you stand up here talking, okay? So I'm going to put the mic down, and come on up if you want to.
Here I am, down on